Welcome to part 4 of chapter 4's video lecture series. This is going to be another short one because I'm on page basically 254 chapter 4, and as you can see there's not much about list boxes, but I'm going to cover a little bit more because they're going to get to it eventually. On this form you can see that there are two types of list boxes, and what a list box does is it holds a selection of strings, a collection of strings I should say. This is what's called a drop-down list, and this is just a plain list box. The difference being it's a property that distinguishes the two. This one, the user can select one thing only. You can set these up to allow multiple selections if you'd like. This one, they have to drop something down and then select from the list, but they're really the same animal. The list boxes have what's called an item collection that holds all the strings. Now you can populate these things at design time. Okay, it's a collection. As you can see, I've done that here, right? You just open that up under items. Remember I told you it was an items collection. It says collection. And you can type in anything you want, hit enter, and so forth. Now that works fine at design time, but it doesn't work very well at runtime. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you how this works and give you a couple of pointers on how to put strings in and take strings out, and you'll also have to deduce if they've actually selected anything. If you try to get something from a list box that hasn't had a selection on it, it'll throw an error, and there's a way to do that. So I've got these two types of list boxes, and then I've got display, clear, and populate for both of these. Populate actually will, after clear's been clicked, that clears out anything that was in the list box. Populate will actually repopulate these items during runtime. So I'll show you how to do that. And then display will test to see if they've selected something, and if they haven't, it will display an error message saying nothing selected, and that'll show you how that works. If they have, then it will show you two things. One is the text that they've selected from the list box, and the other is the index of that item in the list box. Okay, and remember, like with arrays and loops and things, you always start at index 0 when you're talking about a collection of items like an array, structure, that sort of thing. All right, so let's take a look at how this is going to work, and then we'll start looking inside the code here. Let me run this. Okay, now you see they were populated at design time. So if I click off of this and I don't have any select, I'll also have a way to filter out the keys so they can't type anything in there, because you can also let them type items in there in a drop-down list if you want. See what happens when I click display. Nothing selected. All right, well, let's go ahead and exit this and go in there and look at that real quick. Okay, so here's what we do. This is the button display. It's looking to see if list test, which is the name of my list box, dot selected index. That's the index of the item you selected. Remember, this started 0. Let's go back and I'll show you real quick. That's index 0, bovine, 1, canine, 2, equine, 3, porcine, 4, feline. There are 5 items in there. You start at 0, okay? If it returns from that little piece of code right there, if the listbox.selected index is equal to -1, because all the indexes have a 0 or positive integer. So if it's -1, that means there's nothing selected. You don't need to do anything, or you'll have to handle some errors. So that's all I'm doing. If it's not -1, it must be an actual selection. So this is just a carriage return line feed I'm doing to display some stuff. That's all that is in the message box. And I'm doing a message box show. Selected text is basically the name of the list box dot selected item dot toString. Okay, that will return the text from the selected index. And then I've got another carriage return line feed. I'm just putting these on 2 separate lines in the message box. That's all that is. List text dot selected index. All right, that will give you the index of the item that's selected. All righty, so if we run that again, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select something. We already know what's going to happen if I don't, right? So I've selected equine. I'm going to just click the display button. And since it's not -1, it goes down in here and displays it. And that's my new line right there. I got 2 lines of text. Selected text is equine. Selected index is 2. All right, because that's 0, 1, 2, and we're talking about this list box, 0, 1, and 2. Okay, if I come down here and I select feline, it should display that and give me the index. So the index is always less than the number of elements, one less. So there are 5 elements, one less than 5 is 4, and feline is what I've selected. Okay, now I can clear this list by clicking that, and it resets the default text. Now let's go to the clear button up for this one. Clear list. Okay, so there it is. Now here's your items collection. List text.items.clear. That's a method of the list box items collection. Remember the dot operator. Now you don't need the items collection when you're doing selected index or selected item. Okay, you only need the items when you're going through and adding or removing things. All right, so let's try it. I mean, these have the same basic functionality. There's not much difference. All right, this one I don't have anything selected. I should get that same message, and I do. And there's feline. I'm going to display that. And it says, you know, feline is what I selected. The selected index is 4. Now I'm going to hit the clear button. Now notice that the populate button here is disabled. Now this is an exception avoidance technique. No, you're not really handling an exception because you're keeping it from occurring. I often will toggle these buttons on and off so that the user, if there's nothing to clear, they can't click clear, but they can click populate. So keep that in the back of your head. You'll see this a lot in my stuff, okay? So populate, I've just populated it. And let's go back and look at the populate button. List text, that's the name of the list box. Dot items, that's the items collection. Dot add, and there's my string. It's the same thing we typed in at design time, only I'm repopulating this at runtime. Now you can move these around and sort them and do different things with them. You can allow them to drag and drop and that sort of thing. Okay. Let's see. I want to show you one other thing here. All right. I have a, where is it? Yeah. CBO test. That's the CBO is the combo box, which is still a list box. It just allows a drop down component. I'm handling the key down event. So if the user presses a key, this will fire if that control has the focus at that point in time. I don't want them to be able to type anything in there, which they can do, right? You can allow them to do that if you want in the little header section up there, and it can add it to the list and do different things. I'm suppressing that keystroke, okay, because the E object has all sorts of functionality with regard to key down. So E is the actual key event object. Dot suppress key press. When I set that equal to true, it just ignores any key press the user does in that control. All right, so there are a lot of ways you can avoid issues here, or just enable certain functionality and disable other functionalities. All right, I want to show you one other thing. The book says you can use list test dot selected item dot toString to display the selected text. That is true, but there's also, guess what? A text property. Whoops, sorry, I'm still running. Let me exit this. A text property associated with this, which will do the same thing. And that's this code here. I'll show you. Notice that I've got list test.text, and I don't have to do list test.selected item.toString. It'll do the same exact thing. Let's see if it works. A little extra knowledge that's not in the book. I don't know why, but so if I do this and I click that, see, it still grabs the text for me. So this is a very, very powerful way of doing things. All clear does, it just wipes everything out with that clear method. You can do that. You could sort. You can do all sorts of things. What's going? There it goes. Finally did it. Didn't click on it. Clear does the same thing here. See? And then populate repopulates. Display, I don't have anything selected, so it returns a -1. And you can kind of see if you look at my code here and watch this a couple of times, you'll see what's happening. Now, I've taken you a little further than what they've done, but I'm sure they're going to get right into the middle of this pretty soon. All right. That's the extent of my lecture, even though it took 4 parts for chapter 4. It's a pretty big chapter, so I will see you at chapter 5. Have a good one.